When you look back or you consider where your kids are today, have you been pretty intentional about that financial education component of it? Have you found that they're open to it, Colleen?
Oh yes, yeah. And whether they each child's so different, and
Sure.
everyone had their natural abilities. But we had a program at the house where everybody had a little notebook, and they got $5 allowance every week, and they put it one week in the spend, next in the save, and the next in the donate column. And they had to add up all those little numbers. And if they wanted to buy something, and they had to track that. And it's interesting. For some, the hardest part was parting with money and donating it. But if they would donate it, we would match it. So
Mm.
the money they would donate at any point in time was doubled, and they could see their impact doubled, which encouraged some of the reticent ones to part with some dollars. Some had no problem spending, some had no problem saving, and needed to learn to spend and know what things cost. And so, as much as I'm an accountant by training, and I thought I knew what that exercise was going to look like, it was very interesting to see it through and see what different lessons were taught to each one along the way. And everybody learned something. It was very valuable.
Good for you, because of course, what we've learned and what I've learned, from guests along the way is that, parents just don't spend enough time with their kids teaching them about money. And sadly, the reality of it is that many couples don't really have great conversations between them, let alone, with their children. And, money is often, or can often be, an emotionally charged conversation if you've got a couple, and depending on what their background was, being raised as a child. I didn't have big extensive conversations with, let's say, my parents, although my dad was pretty great. Like, he would take some time and explain a couple of things with me. And it's interesting what sticks. And I just always remember, I was young, I'm probably 14 years old, and it was just a conversation in passing. I think I asked him some question, and it sparked a comment from him, which was, something along the lines of, whatever you do, make sure that you manage your credit, and don't take credit on, and manage your credit rating, and make sure it always stays really strong. Now, I didn't take a lot of advice from my dad. I was kind of not on that same page often with my father, but for some reason, that particular message stuck. And boy, did it ever serve me. So it's interesting where we get the lessons from, and from our parents along the way. So I don't know where I go with that comment, but
Oh,
understanding that it could be so much more intentional.
so true. And it's things that we don't talk about money, and we're taught that it's impolite to ask, right? Which there's probably some merit in that. We don't have to talk only about money, but it would be good if we had healthy conversations around money, around uh, death, or even, right? These are
Sure.
things we don't really have any comfort in discussing. And so when they happen, we have no framework from which to approach. I think it's really important that we try and have these conversations with our kids, with our parents, with our spouses, and hopefully that sets the platform for people to be able to have the conversations a little more freely. Because you're right, those are some of the sticky points that often break things down. And I want to pick up too. It's interesting when you talk about credit card debt. This is one. It's just it's so wrong. Right? It's just
Yeah.
there's certain times that maybe there's a plan and you can use that as financing. But this is really not a good idea most of the time. There'd be other ways to do it. But other things that we are not taught, or that we're taught differently. As a Canadian, you just got to pay down your house, right? Put everything into paying down your house, which was sort of the mentality that I had with mortgages,
Sure.
until you get with like-minded investors and get involved in real estate from a business perspective. And it's not a good idea to pay down your mortgage. There's better uses of your capital generally. You want to have the ability to leverage yourself. In fact, that's the superpower of real estate, right? Is being
Mhm.
able to leapfrog from one to the next with judicious use of debt. So kind of interesting when you have little aha moments over time where some of these Canadianisms, fundamental financial foundational teachings need a little tweaking along the way in order to get you to the next level.
It is so true. So it is very true, and they're emotionally charged because money. And you mentioned even having conversations about death. I mean, these are emotionally charged conversations that very few would be equipped to have, and so you have to be prepared to stumble through it. You have to be prepared to live in and sit in the discomfort of it and the awkward moments where you don't know where to go with a conversation or what to do. But that's actually what pays off. That discomfort of going through it and fumbling your way through it and figuring it out. And if you can get guidance, great. But ultimately, I think, when it comes to families and having these conversations, there's huge payoff in it at the end of the day if you're willing to go through the kind of discomfort and the emotional side of things as you go.